She brought her ex to our anniversary dinner without telling me, then acted like I was the problem for being upset about it. I had spent weeks planning what I thought would be our perfect 2-year celebration, and she turned it into the most humiliating night of my life. I arrived at Morton's Steakhouse in downtown Denver 15 minutes early, wanting everything to be perfect for Jessica and me. I had made the reservation 6 weeks in advance, specifically requesting the corner table by the window that she had mentioned loving when we walked past the restaurant last month. The small velvet box in my jacket pocket contained a pair of diamond earrings I had been saving for since Christmas, not an engagement ring but something meaningful to mark our milestone together. I was genuinely excited about celebrating 2 years of what I believed was a solid, committed relationship with someone I was falling deeply in love with. When Jessica walked through the restaurant entrance, my heart dropped into my stomach because she wasn't alone. Dylan Martinez was right beside her, the cryptocurrency consultant who had caused problems in our relationship 8 months ago when he kept texting her at all hours and showing up at her workplace with coffee and lunch invitations. I had expressed my discomfort about their friendship back then, and Jessica had assured me she would maintain appropriate boundaries with him, but here he was at our intimate anniversary dinner wearing an expensive suit and that smug smile I remembered too well. I stood up from our table, completely stunned and trying to process what was happening as they approached together, Jessica looking perfectly composed while Dylan surveyed the upscale restaurant like he owned the place. I managed to ask Jessica why Dylan was there, keeping my voice low and controlled despite the shock and embarrassment flooding through me, and she responded with cold indifference that I had no right to judge her decisions and that I was being embarrassing with my reaction. Dylan immediately took charge of the situation, sliding into the seat across from me and calling the waiter over to order an expensive bottle of wine without consulting anyone, acting like this was his reservation and his celebration while I sat there trying to understand how my romantic evening had become this nightmare scenario. Jessica seemed to transform before my eyes, laughing too loudly at Dylan's jokes, touching his arm during conversation, and treating me like an unwelcome stranger who happened to be sharing their table, completely ignoring the fact that I had planned and paid for this entire evening. I watched in growing disbelief as she asked Dylan about his recent business trip to Miami, his new BMW, and his plans to expand into international markets, hanging on every word like she had never heard anything more fascinating in her life. The conversation flowed entirely between them while I sat there feeling invisible and increasingly humiliated, realizing that this wasn't some innocent coincidence or miscommunication but a deliberate choice Jessica had made to bring another man to our anniversary dinner. When Dylan excused himself to make a phone call, I quietly asked Jessica what was really happening here and whether she understood how inappropriate and hurtful this was, but she just rolled her eyes and told me I was being possessive and jealous, that Dylan was just a friend and I needed to grow up and stop acting insecure about every man in her life. The worst part was watching her light up whenever Dylan returned to the table, her entire demeanor changing from annoyed tolerance when speaking to me to animated excitement when engaging with him, like someone had flipped a switch that made her come alive in his presence. I realized with growing clarity that I was witnessing something calculated and cruel, not just poor judgment or insensitivity but a deliberate power play designed to show me exactly where I stood in Jessica's priorities and what she thought of our relationship milestone. The expensive wine Dylan had ordered arrived, and he made a show of tasting it and nodding his approval to the sommelier while Jessica watched with obvious admiration, completely ignoring the fact that this was supposed to be our special evening and that I was the one who would ultimately be paying for everything. Dylan began regaling us with stories about his latest cryptocurrency investments, his recent purchase of a downtown loft, and his plans to travel through Europe next month, painting himself as this successful entrepreneur while Jessica hung on every detail like she was watching her future unfold before her eyes. I found myself studying Jessica's face as she listened to Dylan, seeing an expression I had never witnessed during our 2 years together, a kind of hungry fascination mixed with calculation that made my stomach turn with the realization that she was mentally comparing him to me and finding me severely lacking. The conversation became increasingly one-sided as Dylan dominated every topic, from his workout routine at the exclusive gym downtown to his connections with prominent local business leaders, while Jessica encouraged him with questions and compliments that she had never offered about my work as a renewable energy project manager or my passion for environmental sustainability. I attempted several times to redirect the conversation toward shared memories Jessica and I had created over the past 2 years, mentioning our hiking trip to Rocky Mountain National Park or the cooking class we had taken together last spring, but Jessica responded with polite but distant acknowledgement before immediately steering the discussion back to Dylan's achievements and adventures. The worst moment came when Dylan casually mentioned that he and Jessica had been texting regularly over the past few weeks, discussing business opportunities and life philosophy, information that was news to me and delivered with such casual confidence that it was clearly intended to establish their connection and my exclusion from it. I felt the diamond earrings in my pocket like they were burning a hole through the fabric, these carefully chosen symbols of commitment and affection that now seemed pathetically naive given the reality of what was unfolding in front of me. Jessica never once acknowledged that this was our anniversary, never mentioned the significance of the date or the effort I had put into planning this evening, treating it instead like a casual dinner where she had coincidentally brought along someone far more interesting and worthy of her attention. By the time our entrees arrived, I was sitting in stunned silence, watching the woman I thought I knew reveal herself to be someone completely different, someone capable of such calculated cruelty that it made me question everything I believed about our relationship and about her character. The final blow came when Dylan suggested they should all go to this new rooftop bar he knew after dinner, speaking as though I was naturally included but in a way that made it clear he expected to be the one guiding the evening's activities and that Jessica would obviously prefer his company and his plans to anything I might want to do to salvage our anniversary celebration. That was the moment I made my decision, and instead of arguing or pleading or making the scene that Jessica probably expected, I did something that surprised even myself. I calmly raised my hand to signal our waiter, maintaining perfect composure despite the rage and humiliation burning in my chest, and when he approached I quietly requested the complete bill for everything that had been ordered at our table, including the expensive bottle of wine that Dylan had selected and the premium steaks that none of us had finished eating. The waiter seemed confused by my sudden request to settle up mid-meal, but I assured him everything was fine and that I needed to leave for an urgent family matter, a lie that came surprisingly easily given the circumstances I was facing. Dylan looked momentarily puzzled by my actions, probably expecting me to either explode in jealous anger or meekly accept his presence and Jessica's treatment, while Jessica watched me with what I now recognized as calculated curiosity, like she was conducting some kind of social experiment to see how much humiliation I would tolerate before breaking. When the bill arrived, I didn't even look at the total before placing my credit card on the leather folder, knowing it would probably cost me close to $400 but finding that I genuinely didn't care about the money compared to preserving what remained of my dignity in this situation. I stood up slowly, straightening my jacket and looking directly at Jessica with a calm expression that I somehow managed to maintain despite everything I was feeling inside, and told her that she was absolutely correct and that I didn't have the right to judge her decisions, which seemed to catch her off guard since she had probably expected anger or desperation rather than this quiet acceptance. Dylan started to say something about me overreacting, but I simply nodded to both of them politely and walked toward the restaurant exit without looking back, feeling strangely liberated despite the fact that my heart was breaking with every step I took away from the woman I had thought I was building a future with. During the rideshare trip back to my apartment in Capitol Hill, I systematically went through my phone and blocked Jessica on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, WhatsApp, and every other platform where we were connected, each deletion feeling like cutting away infected tissue that needed to be removed for healing to begin. I also blocked her phone number, deleted our text message history, and removed her contact information entirely, actions that felt both devastating and necessary as I watched the city lights blur past the window and tried to process what had just happened to my life. The driver asked if I was okay since I probably looked like someone who had just witnessed a car accident, and I managed to tell him I was fine while privately marveling at how quickly 2 years of relationship history could be reduced to digital deletions and blocked contacts. By the time I reached my apartment building, I felt something unexpected washing over me alongside the pain and betrayal, a sense of clarity and relief that I hadn't experienced in months, like I had been holding my breath underwater and finally surfaced to breathe freely again. I poured myself a bourbon, sat on my couch, and began to really think about Jessica's behavior over the past few months, patterns that I had dismissed or rationalized but that now seemed obviously connected to this evening's calculated cruelty. The next morning brought harsh reality as I woke up alone in my bed and remembered that my relationship was over, not because of some mutual decision or gradual growing apart, but because the woman I loved had deliberately chosen to humiliate me in the most public and painful way possible for reasons I was only beginning to understand. I realized this wasn't some spontaneous decision to invite Dylan along, but something planned and coordinated, a deliberate power play designed to show me exactly how little I meant to her and how easily I could be replaced by someone she considered more worthy of her attention and affection. The more I thought about it, the more obvious it became that Jessica had orchestrated this entire evening as some kind of test or demonstration, perhaps to see if I would fight for her or to prove to herself and to Dylan that she had complete control over my emotions and reactions. I remembered how she had insisted on that specific restaurant, claiming it was because she loved the ambience, when now it seemed more likely that she had chosen it because it was public enough to ensure maximum humiliation but upscale enough to make Dylan feel important and valued. The timing also seemed calculated, bringing him to our anniversary dinner rather than some random evening, ensuring that the emotional impact would be devastating and that any future memories of our relationship milestone would be forever tainted by this betrayal. I found myself analyzing every detail of the evening like I was reviewing a business proposal, looking for clues and motivations that I had missed in the moment, and what I discovered made me sick to my stomach with the realization of how thoroughly I had been manipulated and used. The way Jessica had dressed for dinner, in a new outfit I had never seen before that was more revealing and attention-grabbing than anything she typically wore when we went out together, suggested that she had been preparing for Dylan's presence rather than celebrating with me. Her behavior throughout the evening, the way she had positioned herself physically closer to Dylan than to me, the topics of conversation she had chosen to focus on, and her complete dismissal of my obvious discomfort all pointed to someone who had made her choice long before walking into that restaurant. I realized that I had been nothing more than a prop in whatever game she was playing with Dylan, the unwitting participant in her demonstration of power and desirability, the fool who paid for the dinner where she publicly humiliated him in favor of another man. The cruelest part was how naturally it had all flowed, how comfortable she had seemed with the entire situation, suggesting that this wasn't her first time manipulating someone this way, or that she had been planning this particular scenario for longer than I wanted to imagine. I spent the rest of that morning deleting photos of us from my phone and social media, each image now looking like evidence of my own naivety rather than happy memories of a relationship I had valued and protected. By noon, I felt hollow but strangely peaceful, like someone who had finally stopped hitting their head against a wall and was surprised by how good it felt when the pain stopped, ready to begin the process of rebuilding my life without someone who had never truly valued what I offered or respected who I was as a person. I maintained complete radio silence for the next several days, refusing every urge to check Jessica's social media or reach out to mutual friends for information about her reaction to my disappearance, knowing that any contact would only weaken my resolve and give her another opportunity to manipulate the situation to her advantage. The silence was harder than I expected, not because I missed her but because I kept catching myself reaching for my phone to text her about random things, muscle memory from 2 years of constant communication that my brain hadn't yet processed was over forever. Jessica's attempts at contact began within hours of my blocking her, starting with calls from unknown numbers that I let go to voicemail, then escalating to messages sent through her friends' accounts and even fake social media profiles she created just to try reaching me. Her initial messages were carefully crafted to sound reasonable and mature, claiming that I had misunderstood the situation at dinner and that she just wanted to explain herself, but I could see through the manipulation tactics that had probably worked on me countless times before. When I didn't respond to her fake apologies, the messages became more desperate and revealing, with Jessica alternating between blaming me for overreacting to what she called an innocent dinner with a friend, and demanding that I stop punishing her for being friendly and social with other people. The psychological warfare escalated when she sent an expensive floral arrangement to my office with a card that read, "I'm sorry you felt uncomfortable, let's talk like adults." A non-apology that somehow managed to make the entire situation my fault while positioning herself as the reasonable party trying to fix my emotional problems. My coworkers noticed the flowers and asked questions I wasn't ready to answer, so I donated the arrangement to the receptionist and asked building security to refuse any future deliveries addressed to me, a precaution that proved necessary when Jessica tried sending gifts twice more that week. The most manipulative attempt came when Jessica recruited her roommate Monica to call me, claiming she was worried about Jessica's emotional state and begging me to at least hear Jessica out because she was falling apart without me, a performance that might have worked if I hadn't recognized it as another calculated move in Jessica's playbook. I politely told Monica that I appreciated her concern but that Jessica had made her priorities clear at dinner and that I wouldn't be participating in any further drama or discussions about our relationship, then asked her not to contact me again on Jessica's behalf. Monica seemed genuinely surprised by my calm but firm response, probably expecting the desperate, heartbroken man that Jessica had described to her, and I could hear the confusion in her voice as she realized that I wasn't playing the role Jessica had assigned to me in this narrative. The most insidious part of Jessica's campaign was how she began spreading a carefully crafted story to our mutual friends, painting herself as the victim of my controlling and jealous behavior while conveniently omitting the details about bringing her ex-boyfriend to our anniversary dinner without warning. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard fragments of her version of events, where I had become irrationally angry about her having male friends and had stormed out of dinner in a jealous rage, leaving her humiliated and confused about my sudden personality change. She told people that I had become possessive and emotionally abusive over the past few months, isolating her from friends and monitoring her social activities, accusations that were complete fabrications but delivered with enough emotional conviction to make people question what they thought they knew about me. The character assassination was systematic and effective, designed to ensure that if I tried to tell my side of the story, I would look like an angry ex-boyfriend trying to justify controlling behavior rather than someone who had been deliberately betrayed and humiliated. I realized that Jessica wasn't just trying to win me back or salvage our relationship, but was actively working to destroy my reputation and social connections as punishment for refusing to accept her treatment and walking away with my dignity intact. The cruelest part was hearing that some people I considered friends were actually buying into her narrative, questioning whether I had hidden, controlling tendencies they had missed and wondering if Jessica's version of events explained behavior they had previously attributed to my thoughtful and planning-oriented personality. I found myself in the surreal position of defending my character against accusations that were completely fabricated, trying to explain to confused friends that my careful planning and attention to detail weren't signs of control issues but simply how I showed care and consideration for the people I loved. The gaslighting was so thorough and convincing that I began second-guessing my own memories and reactions, wondering if I had somehow misinterpreted what happened at dinner or if my response had been disproportionate to Jessica's behavior, until I forced myself to write down exactly what had occurred without editorial commentary. Seeing the facts laid out objectively on paper reminded me that bringing an ex-boyfriend to an anniversary dinner without warning wasn't normal social behavior, and that my decision to leave rather than engage in public drama had been the mature and dignified response to an impossible situation. Jessica's social media activity during this period became increasingly erratic and revealing, alternating between cryptic posts about toxic people who couldn't handle strong, independent women, and carefully curated photos suggesting she was living her best life and thriving without negative influences. She posted pictures from expensive restaurants and bars around Denver, always with groups of friends or mysterious male companions whose faces were strategically cropped out of frame, creating a narrative of popularity and desirability that felt desperate rather than authentic. The most telling posts were her inspirational quotes about knowing your worth and not settling for people who don't appreciate your value, messages that were clearly directed at me but phrased as general wisdom for her followers who didn't know the context behind her philosophical observations. I noticed through mutual connections that she was monitoring my online activity obsessively, immediately liking and commenting on posts from our shared friends whenever I interacted with them, as if she was marking territory or ensuring her presence was felt in every social space we had previously occupied together. Her behavior reminded me of a politician running a campaign rather than someone genuinely hurt by the end of a relationship, every action calculated for maximum impact and strategic advantage rather than expressing authentic emotions or seeking real resolution. The most disturbing aspect was realizing that this systematic character assassination and manipulation campaign wasn't something Jessica had developed in response to our breakup, but was likely her standard operating procedure for managing relationships and conflicts, suggesting that I had been lucky to escape before experiencing even worse treatment. I began to understand that the woman I thought I had been dating for 2 years was essentially a carefully constructed persona designed to extract maximum value from me while keeping her options open for better opportunities, and that Dylan's presence at our anniversary dinner had been her way of officially announcing my replacement while ensuring I couldn't claim ignorance about her intentions. The relief I felt at being free from this psychological manipulation was almost overwhelming, like discovering that what I thought was love had actually been an elaborate con game where I was always destined to be the mark rather than the beneficiary. I threw myself into my work as a renewable energy project manager with an intensity that surprised my colleagues, channeling all my emotional energy into analyzing solar farm efficiency reports and coordinating wind turbine installations across Colorado, finding genuine satisfaction in projects that created measurable positive impact rather than the emotional chaos I had been living with for months. My supervisor noticed my increased productivity and focus, commenting that I seemed more engaged and creative in my problem-solving approach than I had been in recent memory, which made me realize how much Jessica's constant drama and demands had been draining my professional performance without my awareness. I started staying late at the office not because I was avoiding going home, but because I was genuinely excited about the innovative sustainability projects our team was developing, and for the first time in years I felt like I was building something meaningful rather than just managing someone else's emotional needs and financial expectations. The weekends became opportunities to reconnect with college friends who had gradually distanced themselves during my relationship with Jessica, people I now realized had probably seen through her manipulative behavior long before I was ready to acknowledge it myself. Colin Martinez, my old roommate from Colorado State who worked as a physical therapist in Boulder, became my primary support system and workout partner, helping me process the betrayal through honest conversations during our hiking trips in the Flatirons and our regular sessions at his gym. Colin had never liked Jessica, something he admitted now that she was out of the picture, explaining that she had always seemed calculating and performative around our friend group, like she was constantly evaluating whether people were useful to her rather than enjoying genuine connections. Through Colin's network of friends and colleagues, I began learning disturbing information about Jessica's behavior during our relationship that I had been completely unaware of, details that painted a picture of someone far more manipulative and calculating than I had ever imagined. Dylan had apparently been telling people around Denver's business community for weeks that he was getting Jessica back from her boring boyfriend, describing me as a temporary placeholder who didn't understand what a woman like Jessica needed or deserved from life. Several mutual acquaintances had witnessed Jessica and Dylan meeting for coffee and lunch dates over the past month, encounters that Jessica had never mentioned to me and that Dylan had been openly describing as part of his campaign to win her back from someone he considered completely unworthy of her attention. The most shocking revelation came through Colin's girlfriend Sarah, who worked in luxury real estate and had heard Jessica discussing her relationship strategy with colleagues, describing how she was keeping me around for stability while exploring better options with more successful and ambitious men. According to Sarah, Jessica had been systematically comparing my income, career prospects, and lifestyle to other men she met through work and social events, treating our relationship like a business arrangement that she could upgrade whenever a better offer presented itself. This information explained so much about Jessica's behavior over the past few months: her increasing demands for expensive dinners and gifts, her constant comments about other couples' vacations and purchases, and her obvious dissatisfaction with my practical approach to finances and future planning. I realized that the anniversary dinner hadn't been spontaneous cruelty but the culmination of a long-term plan to replace me with Dylan while ensuring I understood exactly how inadequate she considered me compared to her new choice. Jessica's social media activity during this period became increasingly erratic and desperate, alternating between posts suggesting she was living her best life with cryptic messages about people who couldn't handle strong, independent women, creating a narrative that fooled some people but looked pathetic to anyone paying attention to the patterns. She posted photos from expensive restaurants and exclusive events around Denver, always carefully cropped to hide whether she was alone or with company, creating an illusion of popularity and success that felt more like performance art than genuine happiness. The most telling posts were her inspirational quotes about knowing your worth and not accepting less than you deserve, messages that were clearly directed at me but delivered as general wisdom for her followers who didn't understand the irony of relationship advice from someone who had just sabotaged a committed partnership for short-term validation. Colin and I spent hours analyzing Jessica's behavior from a psychological perspective, with him providing insights from his work with clients recovering from toxic relationships and helping me understand the manipulation tactics I had been subjected to without recognizing them. He explained that people like Jessica often maintain multiple romantic options simultaneously, keeping backup plans while pursuing what they perceive as upgrades, and that my steady reliability had probably made me the perfect safety net while she explored more exciting possibilities with men like Dylan. The pattern was textbook narcissistic behavior according to Colin. The way Jessica had systematically isolated me from friends who might have warned me about her character, encouraged my financial dependence on our relationship by expecting expensive gifts and experiences, and then discarded me publicly when she found someone who offered better social status and material prospects. Understanding the psychology behind Jessica's actions helped me process the betrayal more objectively, seeing it as a reflection of her character flaws rather than evidence of my inadequacy as a partner, and recognizing that I had been fortunate to discover her true nature before making any permanent commitments like marriage or shared financial obligations. The most liberating realization was understanding that Jessica's treatment of me had nothing to do with my worth as a person and everything to do with her inability to form genuine emotional connections with anyone, using relationships as transactions rather than opportunities for mutual growth and support. Colin helped me see that my thoughtful approach to planning and gift-giving, which Jessica had criticized as boring and predictable, were actually valuable qualities that the right person would appreciate rather than take for granted or exploit for personal gain. Through our conversations and my own reflection, I began to understand that Jessica had been training me to accept progressively worse treatment by gradually escalating her demands and criticisms, conditioning me to believe that keeping her happy required constant effort and sacrifice while she contributed nothing meaningful to the relationship beyond her physical presence. 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner disaster, I received an unexpected call from Monica, Jessica's roommate and closest confidant, someone I had always considered pleasant but had never developed an independent friendship with during my relationship with Jessica. Her voice sounded different than I remembered, nervous and uncertain, lacking the casual confidence she had displayed during her previous attempt to mediate on Jessica's behalf, and she asked if we could meet for coffee because she had something important to tell me that couldn't be discussed over the phone. My first instinct was to decline, assuming this was another manipulation tactic orchestrated by Jessica to get around my communication blackout, but something in Monica's tone suggested genuine distress rather than calculated intervention, so I agreed to meet her at a neutral coffee shop in downtown Denver the following afternoon. When Monica arrived at the coffee shop, she looked exhausted and conflicted, constantly checking her phone and glancing around nervously as if she expected Jessica to appear at any moment, and she began the conversation by apologizing profusely for her role in the previous phone call where she had tried to convince me to give Jessica another chance. She explained that she had discovered some disturbing information about Jessica's behavior that had completely changed her perspective on our relationship and her loyalty to her longtime roommate, information that she felt morally obligated to share with me regardless of the consequences for her living situation and friendship. The revelation she delivered was more shocking than anything I could have imagined, confirmation that Jessica had deliberately orchestrated the anniversary dinner ambush with Dylan's full cooperation, planning every detail of the evening to maximize my humiliation while demonstrating her power over both men in her life. According to Monica, she had accidentally discovered a series of text messages between Jessica and Dylan from the weeks leading up to our anniversary, conversations where they had discussed their strategy to make me jealous and more appreciative of Jessica by showing me that she had other options and that I wasn't irreplaceable in her life. The text messages Monica described were calculated and cruel, with Jessica and Dylan treating the entire situation like a game where I was the unwitting target, discussing how to position themselves at dinner to create maximum visual impact and what topics of conversation would best highlight Dylan's superiority over me in terms of career success and lifestyle. Monica had screenshots of some of the messages, which she showed me on her phone with obvious reluctance and shame, evidence of Jessica's sociopathic planning that included discussions about which restaurant would provide the best setting for their performance and how to ensure I would pay for the entire evening while being forced to watch Jessica choose Dylan over me. The most disturbing revelation was that this wasn't the first time Jessica had used similar tactics in previous relationships, according to Monica, who admitted that she had witnessed Jessica systematically manipulate and discard other boyfriends using comparable strategies of public humiliation and emotional cruelty designed to destroy their self-esteem while elevating her own sense of power and control. Monica explained that she had previously rationalized Jessica's behavior as relationship immaturity or poor communication skills, but seeing the calculated planning behind the anniversary dinner had forced her to recognize that her roommate was genuinely cruel and manipulative, someone who derived satisfaction from inflicting emotional pain on people who cared about her. She apologized repeatedly for enabling Jessica's behavior over the years, admitting that she had helped cover for Jessica's lies and manipulations because she had been afraid of losing their friendship and didn't want to acknowledge what kind of person she was living with and supporting through her silence and complicity. Monica went on to reveal even more disturbing details about Jessica's pattern of manipulative behavior, explaining that she had watched Jessica systematically sabotage other friends' relationships whenever she felt threatened by their happiness or success, spreading rumors and creating drama designed to isolate people and maintain her position as the center of attention in their social circle. The confession included examples of Jessica's vindictive behavior that I had never witnessed personally, stories about how she had deliberately interfered with Monica's previous romantic relationships by flirting with her boyfriends and creating situations designed to test their loyalty and create conflict between Monica and her partners. Monica described feeling like she had been walking on eggshells for months, afraid to challenge Jessica's increasingly erratic and cruel behavior because she had seen how Jessica destroyed people who crossed her or threatened her sense of control, using social manipulation and character assassination to isolate her targets and turn mutual friends against them. The most shocking revelation was that Jessica had been creating increasingly elaborate lies about me in recent weeks, not just claiming that I was controlling and jealous, but actually fabricating stories about emotional abuse and financial manipulation that Monica knew were completely false based on her observations of our relationship and my character. According to Monica, Jessica had been testing these lies on different people to see which versions were most effective at generating sympathy and support for her narrative, refining her story like a marketing campaign designed to destroy my reputation while positioning herself as a survivor of my alleged mistreatment. Monica showed me more screenshots of Jessica's conversations with mutual friends, messages where Jessica described fictional incidents of me monitoring her phone, restricting her social activities, and making her account for every dollar she spent, accusations that were complete fabrications but delivered with enough emotional detail to seem credible to people who didn't know the truth about our relationship dynamics. The systematic nature of Jessica's lies was genuinely frightening, suggesting someone who was not just manipulative but potentially dangerous in her willingness to destroy innocent people to protect her image and avoid accountability for her actions. And Monica admitted that she had become genuinely afraid of what Jessica might do if she discovered that her roommate was sharing this information with me. Monica explained that she had finally reached her breaking point when she realized that Jessica's behavior wasn't just hurting me or her previous boyfriends, but was actively making Monica complicit in serious character assassination that could have real consequences for my career and future relationships. And she could no longer justify her silence as loyalty to a friend who was willing to destroy innocent people for personal advantage. What started as therapeutic conversations with Monica about Jessica's manipulative patterns gradually evolved into something unexpected and genuine, a friendship based on mutual respect and shared experiences that felt completely different from any interaction I had ever had with Jessica or anyone in her social circle. Monica and I began meeting regularly for coffee and walks around Denver's downtown parks, initially to process our shared experience of Jessica's psychological manipulation, but increasingly just because we enjoyed each other's company and found our conversations intellectually stimulating and emotionally supportive in ways that felt natural rather than forced. Unlike my relationship with Jessica, where I had constantly felt like I was walking on eggshells and managing her emotions, conversations with Monica flowed effortlessly without any sense that I needed to perform or prove my worth, And she seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions rather than evaluating whether I was useful to her in some way. Monica provided invaluable insider knowledge about Jessica's long-standing patterns of narcissistic behavior, helping me understand that the red flags I had dismissed or rationalized during our relationship were actually part of a consistent pattern of manipulation and exploitation that Jessica had perfected over years of practice with previous boyfriends and friends. She explained how Jessica had systematically isolated me from people who might have warned me about her character, subtly discouraging my friendships with Colin and other college friends who had expressed reservations about her behavior, while encouraging relationships with people she could control or who would enable her manipulation tactics. Through our conversations, I began to see how Jessica had gradually trained me to prioritize her needs and desires above my own, using a combination of intermittent positive reinforcement, guilt trips, and veiled threats to withdraw her affection whenever I failed to meet her escalating demands for attention, gifts, and emotional labor. Monica helped me recognize that my thoughtful approach to planning dates and remembering important details, which Jessica had criticized as boring and predictable, were actually valuable qualities that demonstrated genuine care and consideration, traits that the right person would appreciate rather than exploit or take for granted. As we spent more time together, I discovered that Monica and I shared interests in environmental causes and independent films, topics that Jessica had always dismissed as boring or pretentious whenever I tried to discuss them, making me realize how much I had suppressed my own personality and interests to avoid Jessica's criticism and disapproval. Monica was working on a graduate degree in environmental policy while managing her day job in nonprofit fundraising, and our conversations about sustainability initiatives and climate change legislation were intellectually engaging in ways that reminded me how much I had missed having someone who could match my passion for meaningful topics. The contrast between Monica's genuine interest in my work as a renewable energy project manager and Jessica's dismissive attitude toward my career became increasingly apparent as we discussed my latest projects involving solar installations and wind farm efficiency improvements, conversations that Monica found fascinating rather than tedious. What surprised me most was how comfortable and authentic I felt around Monica, like I could express my actual thoughts and opinions without calculating whether they would trigger criticism or drama, and how much I had missed the experience of being with someone who seemed to genuinely enjoy my company rather than tolerate it as a trade-off for other benefits. Monica's insights into psychology and human behavior, informed by her academic background and her unfortunate front-row seat to Jessica's manipulation tactics, helped me understand that healthy relationships should involve mutual respect, genuine communication, and shared emotional labor rather than the one-sided dynamic I had accepted as normal during my time with Jessica. The more time we spent together, the more I realized how much energy I had been wasting trying to manage Jessica's emotions and anticipate her needs, constantly walking on eggshells to avoid triggering her anger or disappointment, while receiving very little emotional support or genuine interest in return. Monica pointed out that I had been describing symptoms of psychological exhaustion and hypervigilance that were common in people recovering from emotionally abusive relationships, helping me understand that my constant anxiety about Jessica's moods and reactions hadn't been normal relationship stress but evidence of systematic emotional manipulation designed to keep me off balance and focused on her needs. Through our conversations, I began to recognize how much I had changed during my relationship with Jessica, gradually becoming more cautious, less confident, and increasingly isolated from friends and activities that brought me joy, all in service of maintaining peace with someone who was fundamentally incapable of appreciating the effort I was making or reciprocating the emotional investment I was providing. Monica helped me understand that Jessica's criticism of my thoughtful planning and attention to detail hadn't been constructive feedback but strategic undermining designed to make me doubt my own judgment and become more dependent on her approval and validation, classic tactics used by manipulative people to maintain control over their partners. The healing process accelerated as I began to rediscover aspects of my personality that I had suppressed or minimized during my relationship with Jessica, interests and qualities that Monica not only accepted but actively encouraged and appreciated. Our friendship felt like returning to myself after years of trying to be someone else, someone smaller and less confident who wouldn't threaten Jessica's need to be the center of attention and the primary beneficiary of any relationship dynamic. What started as debriefing sessions about our shared trauma gradually became something warmer and more meaningful, a connection based on genuine compatibility rather than manipulation or convenience, and I found myself looking forward to our time together with an anticipation I hadn't felt in years. Monica's decision to move out of her shared apartment with Jessica, citing the toxic environment and her inability to continue enabling destructive behavior, marked a turning point in both our healing processes and our developing relationship. The courage it took for Monica to prioritize her own mental health and moral principles over the convenience of her living situation impressed me deeply and demonstrated the kind of integrity that had been completely absent from my relationship with Jessica. 3 weeks after Monica's shocking confession about Jessica's calculated manipulation, I was enjoying a quiet evening with Monica at an intimate wine bar called Julep in Boulder, discussing her graduate research on renewable energy policy and feeling genuinely relaxed for the first time in months, when Jessica appeared in the doorway with Dylan trailing behind her like some kind of twisted backup dancer in her ongoing performance of victimhood and drama. The look on Jessica's face when she spotted us together was a mixture of rage, betrayal, and genuine shock that her former roommate and discarded boyfriend had formed an independent connection without her permission or involvement, and I could see her mind racing as she tried to process this development and figure out how to regain control of a situation that had clearly evolved beyond her manipulation capabilities. Jessica stormed across the wine bar with Dylan recording everything on his phone, probably planning to document whatever scene she was about to create for social media consumption, and she began screaming accusations about conspiracy and betrayal while other patrons turned to stare at the spectacle she was creating in what had been a peaceful, sophisticated establishment. She accused Monica of being a snake who had planned to steal me all along, claiming that their entire friendship had been a long-term scheme to undermine her relationships and steal her boyfriends, while simultaneously accusing me of using Monica for pathetic revenge against her superior choice to upgrade to someone more successful and ambitious like Dylan. The hypocrisy of Jessica's accusations was breathtaking, considering that she was the one who had brought her ex-boyfriend to our anniversary dinner and systematically planned my public humiliation, but she delivered her tirade with such emotional conviction that I could see some bystanders beginning to wonder if she might be the victim in this situation rather than the architect of her own dramatic downfall. Dylan stood behind Jessica, recording her meltdown with obvious enjoyment, probably thinking this would make great content for whatever social media platform he used to document his imaginary success story, while Jessica continued her performance of wounded innocence and betrayal by the two people who should have been most loyal to her manipulative agenda. I remained completely calm throughout Jessica's explosive tirade, speaking to her in the same polite but emotionally detached tone I would use with a stranger having a mental breakdown in public, refusing to give her the angry reaction she was clearly hoping to provoke and document for her victim narrative. When Jessica demanded to know how I could betray her by dating her former best friend, I simply told her that Monica and I had connected over our shared experience of her manipulative behavior, and that we had found genuine compatibility based on mutual respect rather than the exploitation and emotional abuse that had characterized my relationship with her. My total indifference to Jessica's emotional manipulation, combined with the obvious genuine affection I showed when I turned to comfort Monica during the confrontation, seemed to devastate Jessica more than any angry response could have accomplished, and I watched her face cycle through rage, confusion, and what looked like genuine panic as she realized that her usual tactics were completely ineffective. Monica handled the situation with impressive grace and dignity, refusing to engage with Jessica's accusations while making it clear that she had chosen to prioritize her own integrity over enabling destructive behavior, and telling Jessica that she hoped she would eventually get the professional help she clearly needed to address her pattern of manipulation and cruelty toward people who cared about her. The most satisfying moment came when Jessica tried to claim that I was only dating Monica to make her jealous and win her back, forcing me to explain calmly that I had moved on completely from our relationship and that Monica represented everything Jessica had never been capable of offering, including honesty, emotional maturity, and the ability to form genuine connections based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. Jessica's final desperate attempt to regain control involved threatening to expose alleged secrets about my character and behavior, But Monica immediately shut down these lies by pointing out that Jessica had already tried that strategy with multiple people and that her credibility was completely destroyed by her pattern of fabricating stories to avoid accountability for her own actions. The evening ended with restaurant security escorting Jessica and Dylan out of the establishment while Monica and I continued our date, symbolically closing the chapter on my toxic past while opening a new one built on honesty, mutual respect, and the kind of genuine emotional connection I had never experienced during my relationship with someone who saw people as resources to be exploited rather than individuals worthy of love and consideration. The aftermath of Jessica's public meltdown became the talk of our mutual social circle, with several people who had initially believed her victim narrative finally seeing her true character on full display, and the stark contrast between her unhinged behavior and Monica's dignified response helped clarify for everyone who had been telling the truth about our respective relationships with Jessica. Dylan's decision to record and post Jessica's breakdown on social media backfired spectacularly when viewers saw her screaming accusations at two people who were clearly trying to enjoy a quiet evening together, making her look deranged and desperate rather than righteously wronged, and the comments on his video were overwhelmingly critical of Jessica's behavior and supportive of Monica and me. The public nature of Jessica's confrontation finally provided concrete evidence of the manipulative and unstable behavior that Monica and I had been describing to friends, vindication that felt satisfying but also sad as I realized how many people Jessica had probably manipulated over the years without facing any real consequences for her actions. Monica later told me that Jessica had been texting her frantically for days after the wine bar incident, alternating between threats and desperate apologies, trying every manipulation tactic in her arsenal to regain control over her former roommate and repair her damaged reputation. But Monica had blocked her on everything and refused to engage with someone who had proven herself capable of such calculated cruelty. The contrast between Jessica's chaotic desperation and the peaceful stability of my developing relationship with Monica couldn't have been more stark, highlighting just how much energy I had been wasting trying to manage someone else's emotional dysfunction instead of building something positive with a person who actually wanted to be there. In the weeks following the confrontation, I heard through mutual friends that Jessica and Dylan's relationship had already begun deteriorating, apparently because Dylan had expected Jessica to be grateful for his support during her public breakdown, while Jessica had expected him to provide the kind of financial and emotional support she had been extracting from me, creating a dynamic where both people were using each other without either getting what they really wanted. The irony wasn't lost on me that Jessica had destroyed a genuine relationship with someone who actually cared about her in pursuit of someone who was ultimately just as manipulative and self-interested as she was, and that Dylan had probably targeted her specifically because he recognized her vulnerability and need for external validation that he could exploit for his own purposes. Looking back on the entire experience, from the anniversary dinner betrayal to the wine bar confrontation, I realized that Jessica had actually done me an enormous favor by revealing her true character before I made any permanent commitments that would have been much more difficult and expensive to untangle later in life.